Hello everypony, Visual Pony here once again. Well, today I bring you two chapters actually. The other one I've read this morning. Now it's 10:20 p.m. and I will start reading the 8th chapter of Children of the Night. I wrote this today actually, and I try to keep the readings up to date as fast as I can, so like trying to make the reading on the day I write the chapter. That's not always possible, so I beg your forgiveness for this, but I am taking care of someone, and so I don't always have the free time to do this. Okay, let's start. Children of the Night, Chapter 8, Victory and Defeat. It had been several nights since Moonsinger had sent out word of their mother's return and the request made by her sister. Most of the law enforcement branches from all over the garden had voted in favor of that request. Some, however, did not want to involve themselves with the matters of the daylight ponies. Moonsinger sat in her office in the town hall of Gemini, reading the reports that had come in shortly before sundown. Out of 40 settlements, 36 had voted in favor. The remaining 4 she would have to split up and make them patrol the barrier in shifts. After all, if the changelings chose to come here, it was not a good idea to leave the garden defenseless. She sighed and put a hoof up to her forehead. For centuries this place had never had to prepare for war. She just didn't know what to do anymore. She turned her attention to one of the other piles of reports on her desk. These were from store owners and innkeepers that were complaining about the law enforcement's acting out of line, or ruining business for them since they wanted a place to sleep and supplies without paying for them. Of course she knew that these ponies had to make a living, but they needed the supplies. Gemini was to be the launching point for their counter-invasion, but she just hadn't thought about the supply situation when she had made the decision. Her mother and Celestia had warned her and told her to choose a bigger town, but she had refused. At the time, it had seemed like a good idea to choose the town closest to the barrier. But now? Gemini had barely 1,000 citizens at the best of times, and about 100 tourists who wanted to visit the garden's very first settlement. The problem she had to deal with now was that about 2,000 law enforcers were already here, and another 9,000 were on their way. She threw the reports in the air, letting a scream of frustration escape her mouth. There was just no damn way Gemini could support that many ponies. All day she had tried to calculate and delegate tasks and supplies, but no matter how much she tried, she couldn't find a way for this town to handle the strain. That moment there was a knock at the door. Moonsinger waved a hoof and shouted to leave her alone, but the door opened anyway. As she rose her head, which she had slammed into the desk when throwing the reports into the air, she saw the dark blue coat of her mother. "You seem to have a problem. Why won't you let Celestia and me help?" "The only problem is Celestia. Had she not asked us to do this, I'd not be drowning in reports." "I asked you to do this as well," Luna clarified. "You're right, but we just don't have the place here to provide a place to stay for that many ponies. What is worse, there are still ponies from outside the barrier coming in. I have several reports here from patrols outside the barrier who have found ponies that try to hide in the forest. To top it all off, I could make the other settlements in the vicinity provide food, but we still have no place for them to sleep." "Is that all? Celestia and I saw something like that coming. That's why I'm here." Luna sat down next to her daughter, unrolling a map of the garden that she had brought with her. "You make the surrounding towns deliver supplies here." She tapped her hoof on the icon that stood for Gemini. "And Celestia and I will expand some of the houses with the magic I used for the garden. More accurately, we will put a shrinking spell upon the inns, so one room will be able to provide housing for hundreds of ponies." Moonsinger's muzzle stood wide open, her eyes wide as saucers. She had not thought about that. Of course, the garden itself used that kind of magic to expand a clearing of only a few hundred hoofs in radius. Using it on the inns, that's genius! "Not really. We wanted to propose that idea to you the first time we asked you to help, but you wouldn't even listen to us. Ever since then, you haven't come home a single time, but locked yourself away here. By the way, I have been out of the barrier today. I think tonight would be a good night for a counterattack. But not even half our forces are here. We are still not organized enough. But Luna put a hoof on her muzzle, stopping her from protesting any further. I have seen how well you children fight. I ask you to stay behind, so don't even try to convince me to come along. I need you here, having an eye on Celestia. She's getting restless, and had it been for her, we had started our attack 2 nights ago, when only a little over 100 ponies had arrived here. Also, she's not used to being ripped of her status as a princess. She may not show it, but it annoys her greatly. So is that the reason why you act so rashly? Moonsinger had shoved aside her mother's hoof and started protesting again. No, I have been out of the forest during the day and spied on Ponyville personally. Tonight there is an execution planned there. Some of the ponies who are immune to their mind control are being executed, and I just can't let that happen. With the spectacle of this event, most of the changelings stationed there will be in the town square. Not only that, but there aren't as many as I had anticipated. When I walked among them using a transformation spell, I found out that there are only a little over 100 changelings there. With our current strength, we can overwhelm them before they know what hit them. Even more so, we will have an additional base of operations that can serve to house our forces and supply us with food. But we can't stay in Ponyville. It would weaken and ultimately kill us. Luna did not grace her daughter with an answer this time. Once again she bent her neck and took something from her saddlebags. Shortly after, she pulled out a medicine bottle that contained several glowing orbs. What are those? I was not lazy over the last few days either, Moonsinger. These are mana crystals infused with my magic. I have stored several such bottles back in my quarters on the upper floor. They will replenish your magical sparks, as if you had stayed a few days inside the barrier. They are no substitute for the barrier, however, but they can extend the time you can stay outside. Moonsinger took the small bottle, and there was no doubt that there was magical energy radiating from the orbs. But how to administer them? Is it enough to just carry them around with us? Well, you will have to swallow them, but that is also the reason why I suggest not to rely on them too much. They may cause some mild indigestion. Well, better than nothing, I guess. I'm still not satisfied that you want to attack when we are barely ready, but it's as it has always been. And what would that be? If you ask something of us, it will be done. Luna chuckled. Okay then, I will take 500 law enforcers and head out as soon as I can. Don't tell Celestia. If she knew, there is no way we could stop her from coming along, and since she's injured, that wouldn't be a good idea. Moonsinger nodded and hugged her mother's neck before Luna turned around and left her office again. Finally, she had the means to provide housing to that many ponies. With her most important concern laid to rest, she began making arrangements to have food from other cities transferred here. 2 hours later, at the edge of the Everfree forest. Luna stood in the shadow of a tree near the edge of the forest. The 500 ponies she had rallied for this attack were hiding in the shadows as well. All of them had been excited to leave the barrier with their mother, but not so much about fighting. Most of the ones she had taken with her were rest ponies and Pegasi. That was not only to the idea that the magical spark within them would wither away faster if they used their magic, but also there were not so many unicorns among the law enforcers. Most of her children, who were unicorns, were tending in peaceful business, Moonsinger had told her one night. Luna couldn't blame them. Pegasi and Earth ponies were more sturdy, while a single swipe from a timber wolf was enough to break most of the bones in a unicorn's body. She was uneasy with the idea of a fight, even more so to lead her children into battle. She had never wanted them to fight, but there was just no helping it. For a while now, Luna was observing the town square, where a line of several ponies had gathered. There were only about 20 of them, but they were surrounded by about 80 changelings. The other 12 were patrolling the perimeter and the streets of Ponyville. Obviously, they didn't think any pony would attack them here. Luna took a deep breath before addressing her children through the spark of magic that resided in all of them. Due to that, she was able to speak directly into their minds, if they were close enough. There are 6 ways to the town square. Each of them is patrolled by a pair of changelings. We have 12 unicorns with us. I want all of you to hold your hooves on the ground. Circle around town and divide up into groups. Make sure that every group has 2 unicorns. When you encounter the changelings, leave them to the unicorns. Use silencing spells to keep them from raising their alarm, and then take them out. All others are to check the houses on the way, to see if there are changelings hiding in there, and if the ponies inside are okay. We then all rally at the town square and take out the remaining changelings. After that is done, I will raise a barrier to keep them out of the settlement. If I can't do that for some reason, the task falls upon the unicorns. Don't let anything keep you from raising the barrier. The safety of Ponyville's citizens is the top priority here. When she had finished, she turned around to look at her children. All of those he could see were nodding and were already moving out. She herself headed to Sweet Apple Acres, the local apple farm. The farm was a little way out of town, and she just wanted to make sure that there were no changelings hiding there. Also, it would be a great place to cast that little spell she had learned after the changelings' attack on Canterlot. Half an hour later, Flametail and his group had taken out the 2 changelings patrolling their part of town. The houses they had inspected had also been okay. There were mind-controlled ponies inside, peacefully sleeping in their beds. Only a few of them had been minorly injured, and so he had left 2 of the Earth ponies in his group behind to take care of them once they woke up. Now they were hiding in the alleyways between the houses that were closest to the town square. In the middle was a crowd of changelings, surrounding several ponies that were waiting for their execution by beheading. Where in the hay was their mother? He couldn't sense her presence in his vicinity, and he would be even more uneasy to attack them without her present. She would most likely be able to take care of them all by herself, so her absence was unnerving. That was when, due to a loud scream, his attention was drawn to a red Earth pony stallion with a half-green apple as a cutie mark. He was thrashing against his restraints, trying to bucket the changelings that held the ropes on his neck and hooves. They started with the execution, and he seemed to be the first one. Flametail couldn't wait any longer. They had to act now, or that stallion would die, before they could. Big Mac was fighting against those who kept him. For some reason, the strange magic they had used on Applebloom and Granny Smith had not worked on him. He had heard a whisper in the back of his mind that tried to push him into obedience, but he didn't listen to it. There were some other ponies who seemed to be immune as well, but their fate seemed to be sealed. Even so he had tried to resist, the changelings pulled him towards the block that had been placed on a small stage. Next to it stood a changeling with an ancient battle axe on the ground next to him. It looked like it was from the Canterlot Royal Museum, but that was the last of his worries. Big Mac threw all his weight against the rope that pulled him forward, but it still wasn't enough. He would die. He would die a meaningless death, and would never see Applejack again, whom he had overheard to be being held in the Canterlot dungeons. Finally, the changelings had succeeded in pulling him all the way to the block, now pulling his head down, securing him in place. Big Mac glared at the changeling holding the axe in his magic now, raising it into the air with a cruel smile on his face. Just before he could bring it down on his neck, however, the changeling was knocked into the side of the town hall by a red flash of magic. Everything that followed happened so fast that Big Mac never was sure in which order it actually happened. Frostmane saw the signal that Flametail gave with his glowing eyes, and then threw a punch of telekinetic energy towards the changeling executioner, just before she and her group charged into the fray. From all sides the Children of the Night were now charging into the town square, just as if her spell had been a shot from a starting pistol. The Pegasi in each group, obviously eager to be airborne once again, raced up and charged down into the group of changelings. They picked up their surprised foes and flew back up, before diving back down and releasing them inches before they crashed into the ground. That short time to recover from such a fall was not enough for the changelings to save their lives. Frostmane herself made good on her namesake. Her mane, quite similar to the one her mother had had when she was Nightmare Moon, swiped away 6 of the enemies at a time, while her Earth Pony guard kept others from flanking her. They were a good team, and had already repelled several changeling attacks on the garden in the past. Frostmane would not let a single one of them escape, Each and every one of those who touched her magical mane froze into a lump of ice if she wanted them to. Her magical skills were not that great. Moonsinger and others had always been stronger than her, but her mane was what made her unique. Embedded with her own magic, it lashed out at the changelings, while other unicorns used telekinesis to throw them against buildings or on the ground. The earth ponies bucked at the insects with all their might, and some of them were hit so hard that their heads bent into odd angles. What soon became obvious to Frostman, however, and any other, was that the fight dragged on longer than it should have. It should only last seconds, but now it were already 10 minutes. They had come here with an advantage in numbers, and still, as Frostman looked around, she could see that 2 of their fronts were being pushed back. The dead bodies, or injured, of her brothers and sisters lining the way of these fronts' retreat. She levitated herself into the air, and soon saw what was causing the battle to drag on. The double doors of the town hall were standing open, and hundreds of changelings were storming out of it like a river of black ink. They must have used the underground's archive, which was stretching out under all of Ponyville, as makeshift barracks. It then struck her. They had anticipated such an attack. This was a damn trap, and their mother was nowhere to be seen. For the first time since she had joined the law enforcers 300 years ago, Frostmane was afraid for her life. A look into the night sky revealed that even the Pegasi had their fair share of fighting up there. A quick examination of how many changelings were already pushing them back revealed that they were outnumbered almost 10-1. If that fight dragged on any longer, if there came any more changelings, they would not get out of here alive. A few minutes earlier, at Sweet Apple Acres, Luna had inspected the farm's buildings, and the only one she had found had been a yellow earth pony filly with a red mane that had been chained to her bed. Luna could only imagine what horrors that filly had gone through as she removed the chains with her magic without waking the filly up. She knew that there should be an elderly earth pony mare here, but she could not find her anywhere, so she prepared to cast a spell that would make changelings unable to use their transforming powers for a while. As she stepped out of the main building of the farm, she felt flashes of magic in the town center. Quickly it became clear to her that the fight had already started, but there was something that made her dismiss the spell she wanted to cast. She could feel the sparks of her children who were fighting there vanish. That could only mean that they died. There had been the possibility of some injuries or even some deaths, but they were vanishing at such an alarming rate that Luna spread her wings and threw all caution aside when she raced off to Ponyville. As Luna arrived, she saw the impossible. Thousands of changelings, not even attempting to fool her children with their powers, fighting her children all over town. She should have known. This opportunity had been way too good to be true. Chrysalis had set a trap, and she had stepped right into it. With a scream of rage and desperation, Luna threw herself into the battle, lashing out with her magic left and right, killing changelings as she went. Flametail stood back to back with Frostmane on an intersection near the edge of town. Their groups had only moments before joined in retreat. As much as it pained both of them to having to disappoint their mother, there was just no use in fighting a losing battle, and their mother wouldn't want them to do so either. He noticed Frostmane breathing heavily behind him. The strain of her magic was already showing. He would want to fly her out of here, but there was just no way he could. One of his wings had been broken when several changelings had knocked him out of the sky. He himself wasn't in too good shape. The exertion of this outdrawn fight was more than he had anticipated. Just as he thought that was it, he saw a streak of dark blue magic envelop all the changelings surrounding him and his group. He had just enough time to shield his eyes with his hoof, before his face was splattered with changeling blood. As he looked up, he saw their mother already flying off into the direction he had come from. In that direction lay the town square and the thick of the fighting. Luna raced through the streets of Ponyville without landing. Every group of changelings she encountered she enveloped into her telekinesis, either crushing them or ripping them apart. It still wasn't enough. She had to concentrate so hard just to ignore the corpses of ponies that she found all over the place. It had been her children, and each of every one of the corpses made her heart ache. She had underestimated Chrysalis, and that was why her children were dying all over town. The stream of changelings that had come from the underground archive had stopped. That was at least something she could be relieved about. But the continuous use of her magic tired Luna slowly. There were just so many of them that she sometimes had to crush 100 of them at a time, which was, considering that they fought back with their own magic, by no means easy. She could only feel a little under 200 of her children around town by the time she finished what she believed to be the last of the changelings. Back in the town square, dizzy from the overuse of magic, she allowed herself to collapse to the ground. The extensive amount of violence she had just used also made her stomach turn, and she was fighting to keep her last meal where it belonged. Suddenly she felt herself being enveloped in magic that felt very cold and dangerous. As she opened her eyes, she noticed 5 changelings encircling her. All their horns were aglow. Luna tried to fight back with her own magic, but the earlier fight had strained her too much, and as she called upon her magic, everything began to spin in front of her eyes. Before she fainted and was carried off by the changelings, she saw Frostmane limping into the town square. Frostmane had decided to go and check if their mother was okay, but was not prepared to see what she did. Her light blue coat was dirty with a mixture of her own, her brother and sister's, and changeling blood. Her white mane hung limply around her neck as she limped into the town square. Her broken right foreleg was hindering her movement considerably, and her almost depleted magic was no help either. She wanted to help her mother as she saw 5 changelings casting an imprisonment spell and fly off with her. However, she was unable to do so. Her mane didn't have the range to reach out to them, and her magic was almost completely gone. Even if it hadn't been, she didn't know a counterspell for this. All she could do was scream as her mother was taken prisoner right in front of her eyes. Okay, every pony, this was chapter 8, the most up-to-date one. I kinda played with the idea of Luna being captured for a while and was thinking about the pros and contras. But believe me, there will be some nice developments in the future, because I have the story already plotted out in my head. Well, stay tuned for more chapters in the future, and I thank everyone who read the story, who listened to my reading, and now I'm signing off. Sincerely yours, Visual Pony.